start that process with introductions. So I kind of led that off. So in no particular order, I'm just going to kind of call on people. And if you could just introduce yourself to the group, what organization you represent, and perhaps a little bit about your role, that would be great. Thank you so much. So I see Todd, and I'm going to ask for some grace on the pronunciation of your last name, Todd. But is it Kuntz? Is that correct?
Correct.
Todd, good morning. Nice to meet you. If you'd like to go ahead and lead us off there with an introduction, that'd be lovely.
I have been with Project Amour for about 3 years. I work on the DDD side with the kids and also with the transportation for the kids as well. Enjoy it. It's been a great time.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here today and welcome. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and allow some other folks to introduce themselves. I see Nora, you're on the call this morning. So good morning, Nora. If you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Hello, good morning. My name is Nora. I'm with Project Amour. I've been here 2 years and I'm the program coordinator. So with the DDD, so I, work with them and, enjoy it, everything. So, yeah.
Great. Welcome, Nora. Nice to meet you as well. Shaylin. I don't know if Shaylin's having some audio problems or not, but Shaylin's from Project Amour as well. So Shaylin, if your mic's working, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Hi, it's Shaylin with Project Amour, and I'm the director here, and I've been here too many years to count. So nice to see you all again.
Nice to see you as well. All right, I'm going to go ahead and ask Mike Alexander.
Yes, Mike Alexander, Transit Administrator for Town of Oro Valley's Dial-A-Ride.
Good morning, Mike. Nice to have you on the call this morning.
Good morning.
And then Carmen Johnson.
Hi, I'm Carmen Johnson. I work for Catholic Community Services. I am the Associate Director for our Community Living Program, which supports adults with intellectual disabilities in semi-independent group home settings and apartment settings. I've been with the organization for a little over 3 years, and I think that's just about it.
All right, well, great. Thank you, Carmen. I appreciate you joining the call today. Let's see, Steve Knapp.
Good morning. I'm Steve Knapp. I'm the operations manager for Hope Inc. Basically, I make sure that there's paint on the walls and the wheels on the bus go running.
Great. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you joining us today. And then Jessica Winchester.
Hi, I'm Jessica Winchester, and I'm the program administrator for the vocational services at Catholic Community Services. I work with Carmen. I oversee the vocational services and the day program services here. We help individuals who are developmentally disabled, also deaf and hard of hearing. We kind of specialize in that field, as well as any disability or having, if someone's having problems finding a job, we usually have a service for them.
Great, thank you. Let's see who else is on the call today. Jim Campbell. Good morning, Jim. If you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Good morning, this is Jim Campbell. I'm with Beacon Group, and I'm also here with Jerry Lucius.
Okay, great. Good morning, Jerry. Hi, Jerry.
Good morning. Hi.
Good to have you as well. And then, do you know if Mitchell is going to be on the meeting today?
No, Mitch got called away to a outside meeting.
Okay. So when we get to the next part in the agenda after introductions, you'll be championing that part on his behalf, or should we save that for another day potentially?
Is that in regards to the app program?
Yes, correct.
Yes. Yes, I can cover that.
Okay, great. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Okay, let me just see if there's anyone else that is on the call that I haven't allowed the opportunity to introduce themselves. I don't want to overlook anyone intentionally. All right, I think that's everyone. So if I did miss someone, I'm going to go ahead and apologize in advance and ask for some grace. And if I see someone joins the call here in a little bit, I'll find an appropriate time to allow them to make an introduction. So we're going to go ahead and move forward past introductions. So thank you everyone for joining today. So I'm just going to go ahead and move forward with in-kind reporting. Just for awareness with regard to our in-kind form, as part of our regional planning efforts, they're enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. And of course, PAG collects that data on the time dedicated to those meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for any grants and federal dollars. So with that being said, if you're paid with federal dollars, please let us know now so that we do not account your time for our in-kind. And you can do that either verbally or just send me an email saying, please don't count my time in our in-kind recording because your position is paid either entirely or in part by federal dollars. So the time spent in preparation for this meeting is estimated by PAG staff, who are of course knowledgeable on the agenda, any meeting materials, and then of course at the conclusion of this meeting, a session report is automatically going to calculate the time spent in this meeting. So time spent working on any PAG or RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. So I'm going to go ahead and just make sure everyone has that final reminder that if positions pay for federal dollars, please let me know so that we don't use it in our in-kind calculations. You can just email me or let me know verbally at this time. So thank you for that. So we're going to go ahead and move to, I'm sorry, go ahead. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move to the next item on the agenda, which is vehicle inspection platform presentation from the Beacon Group. And so I'm going to allow Beacon Group here a few moments to get settled in, so to speak. And then if you need us to give you permissions to share your screen with the audience, so to speak, let us know. We can make sure that that happens for you, Jim.
Be 1 second here.
Yeah, and so while you're doing that, I see that Sean Mangan has joined us. So I'm going to let Sean introduce himself while you're doing that, if that's okay. Good morning, Sean.
Hi, good morning. I'm Sean Mangan. I'm Assistant General Manager at Sunvan. Happy to join and be a part of the meeting today.
Great to have you. Thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thank you.
All right, so so Jim and Jerry, I'm just going to let you kind of share with us when you're ready to get started. And just as a reminder for those of us that are on the call this morning, this is a vehicle inspection platform presentation. So they're going to kind of go over some elements regarding the Microsoft 365 Power Platform, kind of speak to some of the alignment with the hard copy forms, as we know, for certain elements regarding vehicle inspections, how it ties into reporting, and then of course, some of the elements regarding like device support and SharePoint. So those are kind of some loosely defined items that they'll likely be speaking to. I don't want to speak for them, but that's kind of the general framework in which I believe the presentation will be rooted in. So we're excited to learn more about this particular platform. So Jim and Jerry, whenever you're ready, I'll let you go ahead and let us know that you need to share your screen, and I'll let you get started. And Jim, can you still hear me? I just want to make sure you can still hear me. Okay, well, maybe in the interest of time, we'll jump to item number 4, and then we'll just like circle back to item number 3, if that's okay with people. I just want to make sure we're respectful of everyone's time and address all the items on the agenda, but also want to set the Beacon Group up for success. So if they need a few extra minutes to make sure they have everything ready to present, I want to be fair to them in that way, especially since it sounds like the original presenter got pulled away at the last minute. So I want to allow them to have a little bit of extra time. So we're going to go ahead and jump to item number 4, if that's okay with everyone, and we'll just circle back in a little bit. How about that? Okay, so item number 4 on the agenda is with regard to compliance and maintenance and safety practices. And of course, all of this is in alignment with the goals that are outlined in our coordinated plan, which is on the PEG website. And so there's a variety of elements that are pertinent to this, and they are maintenance and repairs with regard to ADA accessible equipment, some of the preventive maintenance intervals that are outlined, and then of course preventative repairs, and then of course what we would refer to as like unscheduled repairs. And so preventative repairs are kind of the obvious, right? They're very proactive in nature, and then unscheduled is kind of those unforeseen things that happen, right? Go a little awry and need to be repaired because they broke down for whatever reason, and so we have those kind of unscheduled repairs. And then, of course, there's annual inspections with regard to one of the pieces of compliance. And sometimes when a vehicle is inspected, it does fail inspection for different reasons. And there's some procedures that are required when that happens. And of course, reports and appropriate documentation. And then through that, there's obviously the importance of kind of having a strong sense of what your costs are, examining how you're tracking those costs, and even forecasting those costs, because most of you that are on this call have applied for 5310 funding in the past and are subrecipients, which is part of the reason why you're part of this group. But you might have a desire to apply for funding in the future, and some of your forecasted projects might be in the preventive maintenance space. And so it's helpful for you as a potential applicant to kind of have a really strong sense of what the costs have been and where they're headed. You know, are they increasing? Are they decreasing? And how do you kind of calculate the appropriate number to be asking for funding around? So all of that is important for you to be able to sustain great work that you do in our region. So recently, you'll know that we did a lot of mock site visits, right? And a lot of the focus was around many aspects of compliance, but we did spend some time in this maintenance and safety arena. And so I wanted to kind of drive some attention around these pieces, because these were the kind of the main talking points, I think, for most of the people that spent some time with me in that. And I think it's always just a good refresher to make sure that we are on top of our compliance elements as subrecipients of capital assets. So when we talk about maintenance repairs, oftentimes we kind of think of things in kind of 2 buckets. We think of the vehicle itself, right, with the seats and passengers in it and the engine that makes it go and its brakes and windshield wipers, et cetera. But there's this other component, the ADA equipment, lifts and ramps. And depending on the type of vehicle that you were awarded, it might be an accessible vehicle or it might not. So I want to make sure that we're drawing attention to both vehicle itself, whether it's an ADA accessible vehicle or not. And then, of course, if it is, obviously, the ADA accessible equipment. So for maintenance or repairs, one of the things that we kind of draw some attention to in our mock site visits was just really people having a strong sense of what their intervals are. How often are they doing those maintenance or repairs under the preventive maintenance side? And then how are they documenting it? How are they tracking it? So that if you were to have a site visit or an audit, and they were to ask you to kind of show your documentation, show your records on how often those vehicles are being maintained in a state of good repair, you would have the documentation to show that. And so one of the elements that's within that is obviously the ADA accessible equipment. And I know over the span of the last few years, we've had lots of conversations about how do we elevate kind of that standard of care, if you will, that we place on ADA accessible vehicles when it comes to lifts and ramps, and getting additional support on training. I know some of you have a heart for perhaps maintain your own vehicles or partner with other agencies that do maintain their own fleet with regard to ADA accessible vehicles, or making it easier to bring those types of services to our region and having greater flexibility in gaining access to people that can provide that level of service, especially if your program is in a rural area. So since we have everyone, on this call together, I think this would be a great opportunity to really kind of dial in on what are some of the challenges that you feel that might be facing or have faced. And we would like to kind of explore opportunities with ADOT to begin to address those concerns more fully, so that we can be in a great posture to uphold the requirements of keeping these vehicles in a state of good repair, both for the vehicle itself and, of course, the ADA accessible equipment. So I know there's some folks on the call today that are, I guess you say, more seasoned, right? They've been with the program a really long time. And so they have a lot of knowledge, a lot of insight, a lot of wisdom on how they've navigated things in the past, and probably have some insights of what they've been seeing in recent time. And I think there's also some people on the call that are relatively new, right? Maybe they haven't even received their first vehicle that they've been awarded, or maybe they're just here trying to learn more about the program and have a heart for what is done through this program and are considering applying for funding in the future. And so I think being able to share and discuss this particular talking point will be fruitful for all people that are on this call if we make the most of that time. So I'm just going to kind of open it up a little bit for us to share what some of your practices are, but also some of your concerns around maintaining ADA accessible equipment. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for any talking points on that.
Janine, this is Mike from
Hi, Mike.
Valley. Hello.
Mike.
So a problem that we're having, actually there's a couple of them. One is, so we got a write-up from an ADOT inspection at the beginning of September for a fan belt for one of our vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
So we took it down to our vendor and tried to have them fix that. They can't find the part. They've ordered 2 different parts, and they're both the incorrect fan belt. So I'm trying to go to Ford themselves, get an OEM piece for this. I'm just waiting for that to come just to see if it's the correct one. The other one, so in other words, we got a failure from ADOT inspection. I know we have to respond to that within a month, and
Right.
It's looking like we're not going to be able to do that because we can't find the part to replace. So I know we have to report that up just to make sure they're aware.
Right, that within that 30 days is correct, yes.
Correct, yeah. So another piece to this, we had a fallout with one of our vendors, our maintenance vendors. And so in the process of trying to do a new RFP, trying to get a new vendor, nobody responded. We actually handed out the actual contract. Please bid on this. So I think 5 or 6 different maintenance vendors around. None of them responded to us. So now we're in the process, which is long and tedious because you have to get all the support equipment for it, to hire our own mechanics to make this happen. And it's quite challenging, I guess you'd say.
So what kind of support are you looking for in that? what were some things that you think would be helpful at this juncture for you as an organization, for anyone that might be facing something similar?
When we did our RFP, we opened it up for maintenance for all town vehicles. So it's, I mean, it's quite big. I don't know if that was too much to ask for certain local vendors. If we had to do it just for transit vehicles only, I don't know what the reason for that is. But
Okay.
when we got no response at all, okay, we got to look some other way to do it. So we do have our own town mechanics that are helping us do stuff. One thing that we did, we got the authorization from Edmund and Brian from ADOT on our lift inspections. So we do a lift inspection according to the manufacturer's suggestion every, I think, 6 months or 750 lift cycles. So we went through a seminar with Braun, and so now we've been authorized to do our own inspections. So our first one is coming up, I think, in 2 months that we start doing our own inspections. So that's a huge help, because the last time we had that was it's not Auto Safety or not Auto Safety House anymore. And it changed names a few times.
Right.
But, yeah, they came up and did some, and then they had to come back and do some more, and then they were supposed to come back again, and then that fell through, and so it was a big hassle trying to get all these done, and it's quite expensive. So we went through ADOT and Braun, and we're able to get our mechanics certified, not certified, but okayed to do the lift inspections.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. I took some copious notes on that because now I have some questions, but they're slightly outside the scope of what we're supposed to discuss on this agenda. So I'm trying to make sure I don't forget what I want to follow up with you on. But but I did want to make sure that you have the support that you need on following up on some of the challenges with regard to, parts, especially when you're, solving for OEM and you still can't seem to find it. And now it impacts not only the time frame that you have to say, like, we did fix it or attempt to fix it within the 30-day interval, but also, much like the guidebook suggests that if a vehicle fails for things like brakes, HVAC, safety related equipment, any wheelchair or lift kind of components, there's very specific things that if it fails for that, it has to be taken out of service. So in that, that has an impact on the number of people served when, a vehicle is taken out of service. So if we start to see other examples of parts not being able to be fulfilled for whatever reason, I think it's something that perhaps if we're seeing it not only in our region, but in other regions, it's something that we should make ADOT aware of to see what role they could play in assisting or providing some support in that. So I want to kind of make note of that and see what we can do by just sharing that information or insight to ADOT. Anyone else have any other concerns or observations with regard to maintenance repairs and specifically ADA equipment that they'd like to share?
Hi, Janine, it's Shaylin.
Hi, Shaylin. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Well, I don't know if this is on the same thing, but we do have a hard time with the maintenance piece. First of all, it's because we've got the 14 passenger bus, and so the cab part is kind of separate from the actual vehicle part. So, just like getting the two things in two different areas repaired from the same place, we've had a problem finding somebody that does all of it, except places that do like the school buses and things like that. And we're also seeing that it's difficult because nobody has bays high enough. And the place we used to go in the auto mall, they closed the bay down because of not having enough workers. So that's why with Mike, what Mike was saying, he was trying to do like an RFP to get get some kind of vendor to start up a vehicle of maintenance for these kind of vehicles. Was that it?
I think what Mike was sharing was that they have the permission now for their own mechanics to do some of the inspections on the ADA equipment versus having someone else do it. If I'm understanding Mike correctly, I don't want to misconstrue his words, but I believe that's what Mike was sharing.
Yes, that is correct.
So yours sounds like a little bit different because yours, in terms of like his was more rooted in inspection and yours is rooted in, we're trying to find a place that's kind of like one-stop shopping, right? They can tackle the elements of the engine on this vehicle, but they also can evaluate or potentially repair the lift on the vehicle without having to go two separate places. That's the kind of how I was hearing what you were sharing.
Right. And so we've been kind of having some kind of little technical issues with like our cab part. And it's difficult to find people that work on those. So I don't know if there's anybody on the call that, in Tucson that can, when we had the warranty item, we actually had to drive our vehicle up to Phoenix.
Right. I remember that.
So
I know there's been some. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna say, I know there's been some challenges with some places that did repair these types of vehicles in our region, but they have since closed for whatever reason. But then there's also some that are still functioning, but the size of the vehicle that they are able to either work on, period, based on skill set, certifications, et cetera, is not within the footprint of the vehicles that we're needing to get serviced, and or their bays or the actual lift that they use to put these vehicles up so they can get up underneath them does not support that size of a vehicle, whether it just size being dimensions or like gross vehicle weight. Like it's just not designed for that. So we've had to ask people to bring these vehicles to other regions, right? Other cities that do actually have those types of facilities. So I know it's been a challenge. I don't know what the answer to that is, because it's not like we could just pop one up suddenly, that has that kind of support system.
Right.
But I would like to think that there's some other solutions perhaps out there that we can implement that will kind of lighten the load of those challenges that we're facing until we do start to see more entities that serve in that capacity. And so that's what I'd like to bring to ADOT's attention, because if they can help support us with whatever that process or support system would look like, we have some guidelines to follow, and obviously their support on what that looks like. So because at the end of the day, they have to answer the FTA and make sure that whatever they're doing is in alignment with that. So and make sure that they have the appropriate information from us in terms of what we need, but give them the time to address it appropriately. And I see Sean has his hand up, so I'm going to go ahead and let Sean have the floor. Hi, Sean. Sean, did you have something to share? I see that your hand's up. I don't know if Sean can hear me. Sean, can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. All right, well, I'll circle back to Sean. I see his hands up in the prompt in the window that for saying that he has something to share. But for whatever reason, I don't know if he can hear me. So I'll circle back with Sean. Anyone else have anything to share? Oh, I see Sean's hands down now. So Sean, could you hear me earlier?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I feel
Oh,
like
for
we're in a
Pete's sake.
Verizon commercial right now, but
Okay, that's good. Well, so I just had a little comment that may or may
Yeah.
not be helpful. So Sunvan contracts with Ryder for our maintenance, and we have facilities in-house that they utilize with lifts and all of that. But I'm just thinking as a resource, maybe Shaylin might possibly, I don't know if you thought of that, Shaylin, but it might be possible to reach out to Ryder and see if they have at least ideas, if not a solution for your agency. They're very helpful with us, and we've contracted with them for over 25 years, I believe, and they may have some helpful ideas.
oh, that's great feedback. Thank you. I might give them a call and see what I can learn from them, and then perhaps use that information to kind of share with ADOT on what we're trying to do in our region to help subrecipients and see if we can help in that capacity. So, Shaylin, I'd encourage you to reach out to Ryder. That sounds like a great suggestion from Sean.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Mhm.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Yep.
So on that note, I wanted to also just touch on, the preventive maintenance intervals. And so one of the, and I see Steve's hand up, so I'm going to let Steve talk in just a second. But I know I just wanted to have a reminder to everyone, because this is one of the things we talked about during site visits, was just to be mindful that to follow the maintenance intervals per the manual, so to speak, that comes with the manufacturer's specs for that particular vehicle, and make sure that's tied into your preventive maintenance plans, et cetera. So, and then of course, keeping the documentation that's appropriate with that. Same with, the lift cycle count, all of those pieces, making sure you're following that. Because that's something that's very closely examined if you were ever to get a site visit or an audit. And then I'm just going to go ahead and let Steve share what he was going to say. Hi, Steve.
Good morning. Just a quick thought, which might be helpful. We did it in another region where we all kind of sent in who we use for certain applications, and then shared that with everybody so we could sort of enlighten the possibilities out there, because we run into the same things everybody else. So there isn't a one-stop shop for all your needs, but we found that creating good relationships with those that are trusted by others has helped us be able to cover all the bases, even though there isn't really a one-stop shop for everything.
Okay. No, that'd be great. I think what I can do is send out kind of like a spreadsheet, if you will, for everyone to, or I can create a spreadsheet and everyone can share with me their respective maintenance facilities if they feel like sharing that information, or who they use in this space, and I can add it to the spreadsheet and then confirm that the information is accurate, and I can send it out to the group so that people can use that, and then just make sure that if you are a participant in that you document those efforts, because that is an element of coordinating of resources. So that bodes well for future grant cycles. So that's a great reminder, Steve, and I appreciate you bringing it up. So I will champion that to make sure that get a spreadsheet flowing out to the group and give people an opportunity to kind of update that information. I'm going to just take a quick moment before moving on to the next bullet point, if you will, under the same topic, meaning compliance with regard to maintenance and safety practices. I know some other folks have joined the call, so I want to make sure they have an opportunity to introduce themselves. So I see Eric Geller. Eric, if you want to just say hi and say what organization you represent, that'd be great.
Yep. My name is Eric Geller. I'm Associate Director with Easter Seals Blake Foundation in Tucson, Arizona. Hey, how's it going, Jimmy?
It's going well. Thank you. Nice to have you on the call today.
Thanks.
And then Josh Schenker.
Hey folks, Josh Schenker, Chief Program Officer at the Tucson J.
Hi, Josh. Thank you for joining us today. Appreciate you. And Eliana.
Hi, good morning. We're representing Rise Services Caregiving Agency. We work
Hi,
with the
Eliana.
D310 program.
Great, thank you. I appreciate you joining us today. And then Franny, I see that you're on the call. Franny, can you hear me? I don't know if she can hear me or not. But we have Franny from Tohono O'odham Nursing Care Authority on the call today. So Franny, if you can hear me, great to have you today. Welcome. All right, so I'm going to just go ahead and circle back to item number 4, the compliance and maintenance safety practices, and just kind of continue on with that section, and then we will go back to item number 3 for that platform presentation. So the next section was about preventative repairs, and then of course unscheduled repairs. And so I just wanted to bring some attention to both elements. So when we're talking about preventative repairs, just being mindful of the importance of those, because those could potentially lead into what I would call like perhaps preventable failure on an annual inspection, right? So case in point, I'll use myself as an example. I'm not good at checking my windshield wipers. You know, I don't use them that much because we live in the desert, right? And so it's only during monsoon season that it seems like we have to turn them on. And as luck would have it, I always forget to replace them or look at them before monsoon season. And it isn't until I actually turn them on that I realize, oh, look, they're dry rotted and they're not going to serve me well. And that's not the time to need to replace my windshield wipers when I actually really need them. I should be replacing them before, right? So in that space, when we're talking about preventive maintenance and preventative type repairs, windshield wipers is one of those pieces that you could potentially fail an annual inspection for. And everyone knows time is valuable. It takes manpower and time to get out to the inspection station, the time for the inspection. If you're doing it through third party, there's a cost, you have to pay to have that done. So there's lots of costs associated with getting those inspections done. And if it fails for a windshield wiper being dry rotted, that could be painful on a variety of fronts, right? Because it's perhaps preventable, and then you feel like you kind of wasted your time, so to speak, in the sense of it failing for something that could have been prevented. So the more mindful we could be about those preventive pieces and make sure that we're doing them on time. And of course, documenting those pieces will help on both fronts, right? Making sure that we're good stewards of the resources, we're in compliance with the guidelines that are outlined in the ADOT guidebook, but also just reducing kind of unnecessary frustration or costs. And so just a reminder about that. Now, for the unscheduled repairs, much like with when a vehicle fails for specific reasons, especially in the safety arena, it is required that it's taken out of service to report that to ADOT. Well, if you have an unscheduled repair that's going to require that vehicle to be taken out of service, it is important for you to report that vehicle is being taken out of service and for what the reason is for that. And so I just want to make sure that if you are facing that kind of situation, or when you do face that kind of situation, that you make sure that you are notifying ADOT that the vehicle is being taken out of service, and clearly stating why it's being taken out of service. And of course, when the vehicle goes back into service, when you communicate that it got brought back into service, but that you have the documentation to support that it was appropriate for it to go back into service. And then of course that documentation is living in your files, right? But also a copy has been sent to ADOT. And so those are the things that, if you're really successful in keeping your vehicles well maintained and you're lucky you just don't have those unplanned breakdowns, it's easy to kind of forget that that's what you need to do when that rare instance does happen. And so I just want to make sure that if that were to happen, everyone is reminded that that is something that is expected. Never have to take a vehicle out of service. So with that, just want to see if there was any questions or concerns around that, anything that you need some additional support around, because that is, you know, a key element of compliance. And I know some people have had some questions about, like, well, what is considered a reason to take it out of service? Where do we draw the line? And you know, we could kind of split the atom for days on that. I think if you have a question about that when it happens, or you've seen something happen, you weren't really sure which side of the coin it would flip on, the safest bet is to just run it up to ADOT and say, like, where should we stand on this? Is this something that we could still keep in service, or is this something that we would need to remove it from service, so that you can make sure that you're feeling good in sticking with compliance related aspects of that. So if there aren't no like suggestions or comments, I'm going to move to annual inspections, which has a very similar theme, because we're going to talk about like failures and reporting and documentation. And the documentation is probably the piece that I'm perhaps the most concerned about, in the sense that when we did site visits and stuff, I think like there's the highest margin for people to be either submitting the documentation late, or they're really great on having the documentation but just forgetting to send up general. And sometimes I think it's because of those gray areas. So I think, if, again, to kind of reaffirm, if you have kind of stuck in a gray area, it's always just good to ask. And so for clarity on some things, for annual inspections, obviously ADOT EQS has inspection stations where you can bring your vehicles in, and there's no cost to you to do that, in terms of you don't have to pay a fee. But you are allowed to use a third party, but you still have to use that third party inspection form. And when you use that, it is your responsibility to scan it, and then of course keep a copy for your files, but send it to ADOT, because when people take their vehicles to the ADOT inspection station, ADOT's inspection station is supposed to submit it up to ADOT, so you don't have to worry about that. My personal preference would be that, just to make it easy, regardless of what EQS, whether you use EQS's inspection station or a third party, to just get in the habit of scanning it and sending it to ADOT, because that's our best chance, so to speak, of ensuring that your annual inspection is documented. So, because no one likes to get the report from ADOT saying, hey, you know, these vehicles are awaiting inspection and they already have been inspected. It's just, for whatever reason, that documentation didn't make it from EQS to the fleet management side of ADOT. So if we can help champion that, that help us all sleep easy and not have to get emails about things that have already been done. So, and then if you're starting to see a pattern on that, of course, let me know, and I can address that separately with ADOT. If you're consistently seeing notifications for inspections that have already been done, that's definitely something that shouldn't happen. But one-offs can happen, but if we can help minimize even those one-offs, I think sending that documentation just helps everyone get in the rhythm of sending documentation, but also helping to satisfy that compliance piece. But the other piece that I wanted to share with regard to the documentation of those annual inspections is, if you're, let me retract that statement for a second. Before you send your documentation, let's just talk about the inspection itself. When you have the inspection and you're signing off on that inspection, you are literally signing off saying you understand and you agree to those inspection results, right? The findings. And so if that statement is true, I think it's really important for whoever is the person that's bringing their vehicle in to really take the time and make sure that they're talking to that person at the inspection station and make sure they understand what the report says and what is expected of them moving forward. And I know sometimes when you read the report later, you're kind of wishing you had some additional context. So I think it's just a reminder that when you're in that moment and before you sign it, and I know everybody's in a hurry, just take a few seconds and look at the form where you sign it and ask good questions, just so you know what lies ahead, especially if it's a failure. The other piece is it's a great opportunity to also be mindful of opportunities to be proactive. So let's say your inspection passes, right? But they're making documentations on there that's saying, you know, there's so much tread on your tires left, there's so much left on your brakes. Those little touch points can help you kind of foreshadow when you might need to bring the vehicle in for brakes, or when you might need to be budgeting for tires based on what you know the tread life is, or how many miles you typically drive in a given interval of time. It can help you with your budgeting, and it can help you make sure that it doesn't fail for tires. It can help you make sure it doesn't fail for like windshield wipers and stuff like that, of course. But just paying attention to some of the findings on the inspection report, even when it passes. And what I don't want to have happen is people pay attention to the inspection reports really well when it fails, but aren't really making the most of the opportunity that presents itself by paying attention to inspection reports when they actually do pass, because there's lots of great information on there that you can use for future planning. So just to be mindful of that. And then of course, sometimes, we're all human, we make mistakes. Sometimes a vehicle can fail for something that it really shouldn't fail for. And so if you're going through that and you're talking to the person and you see something, or the person who brought the vehicle sees something that's a kind of an easy fix, like it failed because they don't see a first aid kit, or they don't see the orange triangles, and it's just because they rolled up underneath the seat, or the inspectors used to looking for them like in the glove box, but you store them somewhere else and they didn't really look there for them, and you're like, they're right here, So I think sometimes there's an opportunity to resolve it in the moment without having to make a second trip out there for a failed inspection. So just being mindful of those opportunities, because you are signing off saying you agree and you understand that inspection. So just make sure to make the most of that opportunity. And then, of course, like I said, make sure you're sending that documentation to ADOT. And then, much like Mike had shared with us as a reminder, if it does fail an inspection, according to the guidebook, you have 30 days to make the required repairs for it to be suitable to be back in service, right? Post failure or in a passing standard. And it is your responsibility to not only get those repairs done, it's also your responsibility to show the documentation to ADOT that you fulfilled that requirement. So I think a lot of people do a great job of actually doing the repair work, but sometimes the sending of the information doesn't always get up there in a timely fashion. So I want to make sure that we're kind of tightening that piece up, because I think that'll be helpful on all fronts. So on the next one, with cost tracking and forecasting, that was the other touch point I wanted to talk about a little bit for number 4. It ties well into all of this. So paying attention to intervals, paying attention to patterns that you're seeing through your inspections for the different types of vehicles, why it fails, how often you're going through tires, the costs associated with tires, et cetera. All those pieces, the more aware you are of where you're headed in terms of costs, opportunities to shave down costs, can serve you well in terms of not only being good stewards of your resources, but for budgeting and future planning, so that when you do lean into a grant cycle, you can have more confidence in saying, I know the best fit for us based on useful guidelines, et cetera, is to apply for preventive maintenance funds. And here's why, and here's how I can have confidence on how much I should be applying for. Or I know based on how much we've been spending on just trying to keep this vehicle on the road and its mileage, et cetera, and useful life guidelines, it's better for us to apply for a new vehicle. So all of the elements that go into maintenance and safety practices and the compliance, if you think those data points as being tools to help serve you well later on for future grant cycles, it's just another reason to make sure you keep your documentation and you're tracking it and you're taking a look at it, which provides a great segue for us to go back to item number 3, if I could be so bold, which is the vehicle inspection platform, and see if the Beacon Group is ready to kind of share what they use with us today. So if Mitchell or Jerry or Jim is still on the call with us, I'm going to let them champion that. Are they still on, either of them still on the call? I don't know if they can hear me. Right. Well, I don't know. I don't know if they can hear me.
Janine, it looks like they left.
Okay. All right. Well, today's the day of being flexible, I suppose. So we are, I feel like I can't count anymore. So we're just going to move to item number 5, because I believe that's where we are. We're not going to do number 3. So I apologize for that. If they come back online, we will figure out a way to stop and circle back. But if they're not on, I'm just going to apologize and say we will try to get the information out to you in a different capacity. And if we need to bring this item to the future agenda, make up for it in this one, do that. So, all right, so item number 5 is safety, security, and emergency preparedness. And this is, of course, in line with our goals on the coordinated plan, which is on the PEG website. So accident reporting procedures is one of the pieces that I want to chat about. And we've been really fortunate that this is not something that happens very often in our region, right? But when it does happen, it's good to know what the procedures are. And so the guidebook does speak to what is expected of you for compliance purposes when an accident takes place. In the past, I've sent out a checklist that is like the accident reporting checklist, and it's in draft form, but it's based on the guidebook, like what it says in the guidebook. So you can kind of use it as a helpful tool, kind of some memory joggers, like, oh, I need to contact the insurance company. Oh, I need to send this to ADOT within so many hours. There's all the little details on what needs to happen in the event of an accident. If you need a copy of that, let me know and I can resend it. In the site visit prep book that was sent out in advance of doing those site visits, I believe it also references the accident reporting procedure. So that would be another touch point for you to look at accident reporting procedures. So without going through the checklist and reading the checklist to you, because I don't know that that's a good use of time, what I would want to do is, if there are some stumbling blocks, if you will, when you look at the checklist, or if you are familiar with the checklist, you're saying, this is the part that I've never been clear on, or this is the part that doesn't make sense to me, that we talk about those, because if we can offer more clarity in the guidebook about what is expected when the unexpected happens, meaning an accident, now's the time to prepare for that and allow people to feel confident that they know what needs to be done in the event of an accident. We don't want to wait until someone has an accident and in a time of stress, they're trying to figure that all out. So if you haven't looked at the accident reporting procedures, whether it be in the guidebook or in that checklist in a while, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at that and make sure that everyone in your team that might have a need for understanding those procedures is aware of what those procedures are, is comfortable, and if they have questions, they feel comfortable reaching out to me and I can help guide them. If we get kind of a curveball question, we're like, I don't know the answer, I'll admit to that, and I will definitely elevate it to ADOT to an appropriate answer. So just a reminder on accident reporting procedures. Again, it's one of those things that doesn't happen very often. And so we're thankful and fortunate that that is our story. But now is the time to kind of sharpen our saw and make sure that we know what those procedures are if that were to actually take place. So the next element that I want to touch on is drug and alcohol testing. And so most of the people that are on this call operate vehicles and have drivers that are exempt from drug and alcohol testing, although we do have some folks on the call where that is not their story. They are required to do drug and alcohol testing. So this is a difficult topic to talk about because I want to make sure I don't confuse anyone by saying these are the rules, and some people are exempt and some people are in kind of a murky space. Depends on the program, depends on the vehicle, depends on the driver, and depends on funding, all that good stuff in terms of whether they're exempt or not exempt. So my message to you ultimately is, look at the guidebook and familiarize yourself with it and the FTA circular regarding drug and alcohol testing, and ensure that you're familiar with whether or not any of your staff are either exempt or need to follow the drug and alcohol testing procedures. I believe I sent an email out that had some helpful links on that. I think a link to a video that kind of helps shape that. But if you need additional support around that, or just perhaps clearing up some of the murkiness around it, please reach out to me, because that is a very important compliance item and we do not want to fall short on that. So it's always good to ask if you're uncertain. So the next item is about training with first responders. And so unfortunately, if you look around what's happened in recent time, both in Maui and in other parts of our country, there's been a lot of different types of natural disasters, tragic events, and timing and knowing how to prepare well in the event of an emergency is always something that we should all be mindful of. But I just want to make sure that our group feels like they get the support that they need for different types of training that first responders could support you well in. So we might not ever face a natural disaster, but we might face, well, let me say it, we might not ever face a natural disaster which requires a lot of like evacuation and stuff like that. Let's hope we don't, right? But something that perhaps could happen more often is like a vehicle breaking down. It's 115 degrees outside. We're transporting vulnerable people. What does that look like to get them out of the vehicle if it's necessary that they need to get out of the vehicle, but it's still hot, or maybe there's smoke inside the cabin, and where do we place them, and the pavement's hot, and how do we get first responders there? All of those pieces that if the world goes completely upside down on us for a moment, how do we respond appropriately? And so I want to take a closer look at that and say, what are the opportunities for us to partner, so to speak, with first responders in different types of training that we could bring to our group that would be helpful to your drivers, helpful for your own emergency planning procedures, but even taking it a little bit further in terms of looking at it a little bit more regionally. But I thought a good place to start would be to ask you to give some thought to, one, is that something that you think would be of value? Two, if there is an opportunity for it to be of value, what would you want to get out of it? And then thirdly, which is my next bullet point, is where are there opportunities for some shared learning? So each organization has very unique bench strengths, meaning the skill sets and talents and knowledge and practices that they are exemplary in. and they serve a very specific need or a specific group of people, that those particular insights and practices can still translate well to people that are serving in a very different capacity. And I think there's an opportunity for us to kind of share those practices, that insight and that wisdom with the rest of the group and make the most of different types of training. So when you look at the compliance piece of training in the guidebook, it talks about how safety training is required for all drivers and any safety personnel pertinent to specific vehicles, et cetera, are required to go through different types of training. And some of that is, of course, defensive driving, passenger sensitivity training, and there's a long list. But I think within that framework, there are elements of required training that are pertinent to safety procedures and, of course, emergencies, which is why I want to kind of take that term and perhaps go a little bit broader and see what opportunities exist for us to perhaps bring in first responders. But I also want to use it as an opportunity for us to share resources and coordinate with one another. So with that, I'm just going to open up the floor to any thoughts around that topic. Where do you see kind of some low-hanging fruit, if you will, for us to share different types of insights or knowledge, but also if there is something that you think would be of value to reach out to first responders with and say, like, we could really use some support in this space, what would that look like, or what would that be? So I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to that. And if anyone wants to share what they have, like in their toolkit for, emergencies or safety training or defensive driver training, any things that are part of those core requirements that they're, proud of or willing to share with others, or maybe you host this particular type of training periodically throughout the year, and perhaps other people don't know of it, but you're more than happy to allow folks from around our region to participate in that training, kind of opening doors and making some seats available to people outside your organization. Maybe they're just not aware that that's something that they can do. If you would like to share that, I think that would be great. Again, all of these pieces allow for us to advance regional coordination. And of course, it is something that you would want to document for future grant cycles. So if there's some opportunities for us to be stronger together in that way, I'm going to just open up the floor for people to share that. I see Jessica Winchester has her hand up. Hi, Jessica.
Hey, I know I've probably mentioned this before, and I'm not sure if this is kind of what you're looking for, but we would love to either present or be a part of something to help, procedures, safety and preparedness around deaf folks, people who are deaf or hard of hearing or deaf blind. There's like some common courtesies, as well as just general information that I think would be potentially helpful that people don't normally know, especially surrounding emergencies and travel. So would be open to doing that, or having somebody come and do that, because it is better done by an individual who is a deaf advocate.
I think that'd be great. Do you mind, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you mind giving an example of something that perhaps, wouldn't necessarily be obvious to some folks, but it would be really important for people to be mindful of, that's part of this this training that be helpful, just to give a little bit of context?
Yeah, so just in deaf advocacy, the training we provide, normally people who are deaf, they don't speak English. So even if you're saying the words, they speak ASL, which is like if I said, hey, there's captions for you for somebody who's an ASL speaker, unless they have a really good education and are learning English alongside of ASL, that's not helpful for somebody who is deaf or hard of hearing. And so it's really important to understand that part of it first off. And then the other part of it is in traveling, you know, they're not, if you're driving or if you're a passenger or whatever it might be, you're transporting, they're not necessarily always watching or paying attention to you. And so they might miss certain like emergency, so like the things around them that might say, like if it's a bus, like the steps, they might, you might assume they already know that they need to be watching their step or what, but they're looking at their surroundings because their information's coming visual and not hearing. So not hearing emergency vehicles, they're not hearing the cars passing by, they're not understanding that the situation around them could be dangerous. So we have to be able to show them more visually, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for, Janine, but yeah, they need more information, more visual information to be able to prepare for getting out of the vehicle, for, you know, if there's like a fire or something, let's say in the vehicle, or any kind of situation, we have to be able to communicate that with them.
I think that's great. I think that's a perfect example. And I think it does, you know, open people's eyes to how there's definitely some opportunities to support riders and be stronger advocates for people that are facing different challenges. And I think all the people in the group, they focus on different people throughout our region that have unique needs. And so, you know, Beacon Group and a lot of other organizations could talk about some of the things that we all could be benefited in terms of being mindful of on how do you support someone with a developmental disability during certain times, right? Because the way that they process information or taking information might be different. Same with someone who's visually impaired. And then same with like hearing impairment or even early starts of cognitive decline, you know, as people age or perhaps a brain injury, et cetera. There's lots of different pieces that just being mindful and being aware of and incorporating into your daily practices, we can serve people better and we provide a richer experience. So I think that's a great example. Helps people understand kind of where your heart's at and what you'd like to offer, but also I think it kind of shapes an opportunity for all the other people that are on this call with regard to their own organizations, like what are the things that we incorporate into our training, given who we serve, that a lot of people might not even be aware of. And I think it would be helpful for them to be aware of it. And then people could take that and say, okay, we could definitely incorporate that into our training, even if we don't necessarily serve that population group, but some of the elements, some of the merits, some of the heart of what's being communicated, and that can still serve the people that we do serve well. And I know there are folks on this call that serve more in the public transportation space, so they might see a broader range of folks than some of the ones that are more client-based. But I still think there's a great opportunity if we share that knowledge and insights with people that serve people in a richer way. So thank you, Jessica. So I'm gonna make a note here to reach out to you about that. And then I would encourage anyone that's on the call today that if you're interested in that and you want to connect with Jessica, that I can help be kind of that catalyst or that conduit to get you together. But then also we can kind of get a sense of how many people from collectively from this call have an interested in going through some kind of training or sharing some kind of training, and perhaps we can orchestrate that a little bit more fully. So thank you, I appreciate that. Anyone else? I don't want to miss anyone. I'm looking to see if anyone from the Beacon Group has turned to the call, but I don't see it. Okay. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and move to item number 6 on the agenda. If I don't see any hands up for the last part of safety, security, and emergency preparedness, because we were just leaving off on shared learning opportunities. So ADA accessibility features, we've talked about this quite a bit in the elements that preceded this particular section. So some of it's going to feel a little bit like a recap because there's so much interwoven elements with all of this, and things are interrelated and connected, that by extension of having a discussion on some of these topics, we end up kind of championing some of the things that show up on later on the agenda. It's just kind of an occupational hazard of sorts. So if it feels like we're kind of reiterating some things, you're right, we are. But that's just kind of the nature of what we do. So in terms of the complexity of the program, and it's inherently going to be interconnected. So the first bullet point regarding ADA accessibility features that I want to chat about is the preventative maintenance program. And so earlier when Mike was sharing some of the things that they do, and Shaylin was sharing a little bit some of their challenges on servicing vehicles, whether it be just the main part of the vehicle or the ADA components. That's something that I really do want to help champion in our region in terms of like, how can we make sure that you have the support that you need, that your maintenance programs, especially on the preventative side for ADA accessibility features, is strong. So if you can share with me via email, like what support looks like to you, the challenges that you're facing, or kind of the I don't know what I don't know kind of piece. Like, I'm getting ready to get a vehicle that has these particular features. I'm a new subrecipient. I've read the guidebook. I kind of have a sense of what is expected of me, but I just want to get more clarity. If you can send me an email saying, here's kind of what I need some support around in that, I could take all of those pieces and kind of unpack them, reach out to you if I need some additional information or clarification. But that will put me in a good posture to take it to ADOT and say, here's what we're seeing in our region. And because it has come from multiple subrecipients, I can have a lot of confidence saying that it's not just like one entity having some questions. It's a lot of agencies that are expressing this, but then also allows me to have the opportunity to kind of see what the scope of the concern is, and the scope of the level of support that's needed to meet your needs around that. So if you can share that with me in an email, that'd be great. This way, I'm not misconstruing anything. Like if we talk about it by phone first, and I think I understand what you're saying, and then I just go to ADOT and say, here's kind of what I understand. I might be misinterpreting it. So I really just want to have it your words, so I can use that correctly and make sure that I'm having an opportunity to kind of process it and ask clarifying questions before going to ADOT. So that would help me. It also helps me make sure I'm accountable to you in that way, right? So I have something in writing that says, here's what you asked of me, and I can make sure that I'm good on following up with that. So if you could send that to me, that would be great. And that ties in with like the access to adequate maintenance. I know, Shaylin, you had expressed, and I think you articulated it well, about how sometimes maintenance facilities no longer exist, but also ones that do exist can't support that particular vehicle type. So make sure you include challenges like that, and give me details. Like, we don't have challenges with this type of vehicle, but we do have challenges with another type of vehicle given its size or what it has. So the last two pieces is the repairing or replacing procedures on ADA accessibility vehicles. Make sure you're aware of what the guidelines are based on the manufacturer, what's allowed, what's not allowed. For some things, OEM parts are acceptable, but We also have other options. For other things, it's only OEM. So that's the understanding for some things, with regard to vehicles, but that may or may not be true for ADA accessible vehicles. So make sure that you know what is allowed, what's accepted, and what is not, so that especially if you're paying someone to do repairs or do the maintenance, you have confidence that they're doing in alignment with what's accepted through ADOT and the FTA, right? So make sure that you're aware of that. If there's questions that you have about that and we need to reach out to Braun or any of the other vendors for additional support on that and clarification, we can support you on that. So just, again, communicate if you have questions on that, but definitely spend some time taking a look at that, especially if you're anticipating a vehicle that has ADA accessible features on the vehicle, and perhaps this is the first time you've ever been awarded a vehicle, and so you're kind of new in that space. It's a good thing to be mindful of in advance. And then the last part, kind of reiteration of what we talked about with maintenance, but cost tracking and forecasting. So if historically you've never had a vehicle with a lift, so maybe you always had minivans and this is your first season of championing like a cutaway or a vehicle with a lift, there's new costs in your equation that you didn't have before. And so you don't necessarily have a whole lot of data points on what it costs to maintain these particular features. So you're kind of in a great position because it's new. So you're going to have data starting from day one all the way through your entire journey through that vehicle's useful life. And so when it does come time to apply for funding, you're going to have some pretty accurate data because it's all pretty recent. The downside is you've never tracked it before, right? So I would encourage you to reach out to other agencies. Of course, you can reach out to me as well, but reach out to other agencies that have the same kind of vehicles that you've just recently been awarded or are anticipating, receiving, and ask good questions like, hey, what do you track? How do you anticipate or forecast out your costs for these types of accessibility features, so that one, we can kind of plan for those kinds of repairs in our budget, but also you can at some point kind of bounce it off like, okay, this is what we thought it was going to cost. This is what our actual costs are or have been. And now and for a future grant cycle, we know what we need to potentially apply for. So use these opportunities that come from, being good stewards of resources and being compliant to also serve you well for other aspects of, applying for funding, et cetera, in future grant cycles. So, and just to help you manage your budgets well, right? So, questions, concerns about ADA accessibility features. And then I might circle back one more time to see if anyone from the Beacon Group has joined the call, so that we have still more opportunity to do that presentation.
Thanks, Janine. I noted your comment.
Okay. Thank you, Shaylin. I appreciate that.
I would just point out that we've had really good success working directly with ADOT when we have had part issues, and they've been very graceful in letting us use non-OEM parts when OEM parts were at one point 18 months out. So they'd rather have a vehicle rolling with unacceptable replacement parts than sitting for a long period of time.
Right. Yes, I would agree with that. ADOT's been incredibly supportive and very flexible with things, and I think their heart, to your point, is Steve, is would rather see a vehicle on the road serving people than parked somewhere because of something like that. So they've also been great on, like Mike was sharing about supporting them in the process for what they try to champion in terms of like the getting approved to do their own lift inspections and stuff like that. So my message to you is that, ADOT is there to support us, and they do a great job of supporting us. So make the most of that relationship. And so if you have questions, concerns, you need a different level of support, Don't keep it bottled up. Ask good questions and see how we can support you on that. Because chances are you're probably not the only one that has that question, probably not the only one that has that concern. And truth be told, there might be, someone that doesn't know that concern is going to come because they just haven't lived it yet, right? The whole, I don't know what I don't know. So you might be, helping someone else get set up for success in a more proactive manner just by you asking your own questions. So don't be afraid to ask those questions and send me an email, call me, whatever you have to do to get me to help you with that. Because that's what I'm here to do, is to support you. And also don't be afraid to reach out to one another. And that was kind of one of the hopes from those site visits that we did, is to kind of help build those relationships, not only with myself as your mobility manager, but with other sub-recipients, because you're all doing very similar work, right? And have a very similar heart. And I want you to feel comfortable reaching out to one another and learning from one another, because that is part of how coordination happens, is right. We build those relationships, we learn from one another, and figure out what's possible to serve more people with the resources that we have. So, all right, so I'm just going to open up the floor one more time for any other final comments or questions. I don't see Beacon Group on the call still, so I'm going to have to add that item to a future agenda, and then work with them to see what we can send out in lieu of the presentation that was going to happen today.
I would just point out that on ADA vehicles and repairs, there are several user-friendly certified alternatives to Braun and Model 1, aka Creative Bus Sales, especially in the Tucson area, that we've had a lot of good luck with. And nothing against Braun or Creative, but generally these other alternatives are anywhere from 50 to 75% less than working with Braun. So don't be afraid to explore those other options.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate you sharing that. So that's a great reminder for the group and for myself, of course, and I've already written it down, but when I send out that invite, so to speak, to say, like, who do you use, have you found success with in terms of some of these maintenance related items, so that we can kind of share that information with each other. Feel free to put that down. And Steve, if you could help with putting that reminder in it, that'd be great. And then, of course, just a final reminder on any questions or support elements that you need from me or from ADOT with regard to any of these preventive maintenance elements, whether it be the vehicle itself or the ADA accessible features. And then just a final reminder of be thinking about the emergency preparedness, the safety training, talking points that Jessica had shared about serving people well, especially those that are deaf or hearing impaired, and how we can learn from one another. So if there aren't any other questions or comments, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn today's meeting. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your investment of time. I don't take that lightly. So thank you for all the great work you do in our region, and thank you for your commitment to attending these meetings and being active participants. I appreciate it. And please feel free to reach out to me if you need support. I'm always available. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine, and everybody.